Every Jiu Jitsu belt explained. White belt. Every journey in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu begins with the white belt, and it's a stage nobody forgets. It's the belt of survival, frustration, and humility. Walking into the academy for the very first time feels like stepping into another world. You put on the gi, tie that stiff white belt around your waist, even though you don't know how to, and glance around at people who move with effortless precision. They know where their hands should go, how to shift their weight, how to set up submissions before you even realize what's happening. Meanwhile, that you're trying to figure out how to sit in someone's guard without toppling over. That gap between what you see and what you can do is overwhelming, and it defines the beginning of the journey. At this stage, you're learning the absolute basics: guard, mount, side control, and back control. You hear these terms constantly, but in live training, they don't feel like concepts. They feel like traps. The guard isn't just a position. It's a place where your partner is yanking on your posture, trying to sweep or choke you. Mount isn't just sitting on top. It's being crushed under someone's weight, with your arms pinned, wondering how you're supposed to breathe. Every class introduces a technique, but in sparring, your body refuses to cooperate. You're a second too slow, a grip too loose, or you simply forget what you just drilled 5 minutes earlier. And when that happens, you tap a lot. And tapping becomes the first big lesson of jiu-jitsu. You learn quickly that it's not shameful, it's necessary. It keeps you safe, and more importantly, it teaches you that at white belt, you're tapping constantly, to arm bars, triangles, guillotines, even to basic pressure when someone much heavier smothers you. It feels discouraging at first, but every submission you give up is information. You start recognizing the patterns. That choke keeps catching me because I leave my neck exposed, or that sweep works because my weight is too far forward. Slowly, you stop thinking of tapping as failure and start treating it as feedback. The white belt stage is humbling by design. It doesn't matter how strong, athletic, or confident you are outside the academy. Once you're on the mats, you'll be put in bad positions by people smaller, weaker, or older than you. That shock breaks down your ego, and you quickly realize that jiu-jitsu isn't about brute strength, it's about efficiency. A well-placed grip or a small shift in weight can completely neutralize you, no matter how hard you resist. This realization is uncomfortable, but it's also the foundation of progress. Day by day, small improvements begin to show. At first, surviving 30 seconds without being submitted feels like a win. Then one day, you escape mount for the first time. Another day, you remember to keep your elbows tight and stop giving up arm bars so easily. The progress is so gradual that you might not notice it yourself, but your training partners do. That's why white belt is often called the belt of survival. The focus simply isn't on winning yet, it's on enduring, learning to defend, and slowly building confidence in chaotic situations. The emotional side of this stage is just as important as the technical. Many people quit at white belt because it feels like drowning. You show up, get smashed, go home sore, and wonder if you're cut out for it. But those who stay discover something deeper. They realize jiu-jitsu isn't about being better than your teammates, it's about being better than you were yesterday. White belt teaches resilience, and it forces you to deal with discomfort, to keep showing up even when you're frustrated, and to accept that growth takes time. Over weeks and months, the chaos starts to settle. Patterns emerge, and you recognize when a guard pass is coming. You sense when a choke is being set up, and you learn how to frame with your arms. You also get the sense of how to create space with your hips, and how to slow things down when you're overwhelmed. These aren't flashy skills, but they are the foundation for everything else. For the first time, you're not just reacting, you're starting to anticipate. That shift is the first sign that you're moving beyond survival. White belt isn't about winning medals or dominating roles. It's about learning how not to lose and developing the fundamentals of defense, understanding the value of patience, and proving to yourself that you can handle the grind. More than anything, it's about mindset. The belt forces you to let go of pride, embrace the process, and celebrate small victories. Every tap you avoid, every round you survive, every detail you finally understand that they're all stepping stones forward. If you can endure the white belt stage, you've already accomplished something most people never will. You've proven that you're willing to face discomfort head on, that you're willing to learn the hard way, and that you're ready to build the foundation for everything that comes after. And once those foundations are finally in place, jiu-jitsu begins to transform. The next belt is where things really start to click, and where the art stops feeling like chaos and starts feeling like something you can control. Blue belt. The blue belt is the first big milestone in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and for many people, it's the stage where everything starts to feel real. When you first tie that blue belt around your waist, it means you've survived the grind of white belt. You've stuck through all the times you wanted to quit, you've tapped hundreds of times, and now you're finally starting to put the pieces together. It's a moment of pride, but also a wake-up call, because at blue belt, the expectations change. You're no longer just a beginner. This is the belt where fundamentals start to become second nature. The guard, which felt confusing at white belt, suddenly makes sense. You start to see the logic behind different guards: closed guard, half guard, open guard, and understand how they connect to sweeps and submissions. Escapes that once felt impossible become doable because now you know how to stay calm under pressure and use timing instead of brute strength. Submissions like the triangle, armbar, kimura, and rear naked choke aren't just random moves anymore, they're weapons you can set up intentionally. Blue belt is also the belt where you begin to develop your own style. Some people fall in love with playing guard, experimenting with spider guard, lasso, or even early leg locks. Others discover they prefer smashing through defenses with pressure passing. Some lean toward wrestling-heavy approaches, using takedowns and top control. At this level, you're no longer just copying techniques. You're choosing what fits you and starting to build your identity as a grappler. But blue belt is also where the honeymoon phase ends. The novelty of learning something completely new is gone, and now the grind really sets in. This is why so many people quit at blue belt. Progress slows down and the learning curve feels steeper, and suddenly you realize how endless jiu-jitsu really is. It can feel like you've climbed a mountain, only to look up and see that the peak is still far, far away. Those who push through this stage come out sharper and more disciplined. Blue belt teaches you consistency. You can't just show up once or twice a week and expect to improve. You start to understand the value of drilling, of sharpening small details, of showing up even on the days when you don't feel like it. Blue belt isn't about proving you're the best on the mats. It's about proving to yourself that you're committed for the long haul. It's also the belt where you begin to give back, even in small ways. You're not a teacher yet, but brand new white belts will look to you for guidance. They'll ask you how to escape mount, how to set up a triangle choke, or even how to tie their belt. And in helping them, you realize just how much you've learned since you started. In many ways, blue belt is the foundation of everything that comes after. It's the belt that takes you from surviving to actually fighting back with intention. It's the stage that weeds out the casuals from the lifers. And it's the point where jiu-jitsu really stops being just a hobby and starts becoming part of who you are. And once you've built that foundation and carved out your identity, the next stage takes things to an entirely new level where you move from just knowing techniques to truly mastering how to use them. Purple belt. Purple belt is often called the most fun belt in jiu-jitsu, and there's a reason for that. By the time you reach this level, you've survived the grind of white belt, built the base at blue belt, and now you finally get to see the art in martial arts. This is the belt where you stop treating techniques as isolated tricks and begin to see the full system behind them. It's not just an armbar anymore, it's how the armbar connects to the triangle, how the triangle connects to the omoplata, and how the omoplata opens up the sweep. Everything begins to flow. At purple belt, you're not reacting, you're dictating. You're the one setting traps, creating chains, and forcing your opponent to respond to you. This is the belt where you start to feel like you actually own your game. You don't just have moves anymore, you have a style. Maybe it's aggressive guard play, maybe it's relentless passing, maybe it's a slick mix of both, but whatever it is, it's yours. People at the academy start to know you for it. When they roll with you, they know what's coming, and it still works anyway. Purple belts are also dangerous in a different way. They've put in years of mat time, and they've seen enough to have answers for almost everything. You can no longer just catch them with something basic. They know the traps. They know the escapes. They've been there before, and that's why sparring with a purple belt feels different. They're comfortable everywhere, and they're constantly 2 or 3 moves ahead. But purple belt isn't just about improving yourself. It's the belt where you start giving back. At this stage, beginners and even blue belts start looking up to you for guidance. You're no longer just a student. You're becoming a mentor, whether you realize it or not. Teaching someone how to shrimp properly or helping them fix their guard pass isn't just for them. It makes you better too. Explaining techniques forces you to understand them on a deeper level. That's why purple belt is often where people truly begin to own their knowledge. It's also the belt where you prove you're serious. A lot of people never make it this far. White belts drop off, blue belts burn out, but if you've reached purple, it means you've put in years of training and made a long-term commitment. It's not a phase anymore. It's who you are. Being a purple belt means you're a problem solver. You can adapt mid-roll. You can flow from defense into offense seamlessly. You can adjust on the fly when a move fails instead of freezing up. For the first time, jiu-jitsu stops feeling like a puzzle you're trying to solve and starts feeling like a language you can speak fluently. But as exciting as purple belt is, it's still not mastery. The techniques are sharp, the game is yours, but the polish and refinement, that comes at the next stage. Brown belt. By the time someone reaches brown belt, they've already spent close to a decade on the mats. The basics are second nature. The techniques aren't something you have to think about anymore, they're automatic. But this stage isn't about learning more moves. It's about refining everything you already know to the smallest detail. At brown belt, jiu-jitsu starts to feel sharp. The fundamentals you built as a blue belt, the creativity you developed at purple, now it's about polishing them to a razor's edge. Every grip, every angle, every transition matters. Brown belts don't just attack, they anticipate the counters and the counters to those counters. They understand not only how to finish a submission, but how to set it up 5 steps in advance so the opponent doesn't even realize they're walking into a trap. This is also the belt where you're forced to face holes in your game. At purple, you might have been able to skate by with flashy chains or scrambles, but at brown, those gaps get exposed. exposed. The level of competition is higher. Every small mistake can cost you. That's why refinement becomes the theme of this stage. Tightening up escapes, sharpening your pressure passing, making your guard retention bulletproof. It's about smoothing out the rough edges that kept you from being a complete grappler. Brown belts are often leaders in the gym. They run warm-ups, teach classes, and mentor lower belts. In doing so, they discover that teaching is one of the best ways to refine their own knowledge. Explaining a move forces you to simplify it and understand it at its core. That clarity shows up in your own roles, where your jiu-jitsu feels efficient, clean, and effective. And while some belts are about experimentation, brown belt is about ownership. You know what works for you. You have a clear identity on the mats, whether that's a crushing top game, a slick guard, or a specialty like leg locks or chokes. By now, you're not just reacting to what's happening, you're dictating it. But the brown belt stage can also be humbling in a different way. Because you're so close to black, expectations rise. People start treating you as if you already are a black belt. Lower belts roll harder with you, testing themselves. Coaches push you to refine your mindset as much as your technique. It's not enough to just be good. You're expected to be consistent, disciplined, and capable of carrying yourself like a future black belt. The beauty of this stage is that it often feels like the last big climb before the summit. Every roll, every class, every detail polished is part of that final preparation. And when all the pieces come together, you're not just skilled, you're complete. The brown belt isn't the finish line, but it's the last stretch before black. And once you've refined every tool, smoothed out every weakness, and solidified your own style, you're ready for the moment everyone dreams about, tying on the black belt. Black belt. Reaching black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is the dream for almost every practitioner who ties a white belt for the first time. It represents the end of one journey and the beginning of another. For years, you've been learning, surviving, refining, and evolving, and now you wear the rank that signifies mastery. But here's the truth. Black belt isn't the finish line, it's a new starting point. By the time someone earns a black belt, they've usually spent well over a decade on the mats. Thousands of hours of drilling, sparring, competing, and teaching. They've tapped countless times, endured injuries, sacrificed evenings, weekends, and sometimes even careers to stay committed to the art. That long grind is what gives the belt its weight. It's not just about skill, it's about persistence and proving that jiu-jitsu has become a way of life. Technically, a black belt is expected to have a deep understanding of every area of the game. Guard passing, guard retention, submissions, escapes, pressure, movement, strategy, nothing is unfamiliar anymore. A black belt doesn't just know techniques, they know when and why to use them. They understand timing in a way that feels almost instinctual. They can flow between positions seamlessly, adjusting in real time to whatever their opponent gives them. To lower belts, it often feels like they're always one step ahead, because they are. But black belt is about more than just winning roles. At this stage, many practitioners take on the role of a mentor. They begin giving back to the community that shaped them. Teaching, coaching, and guiding the next generation becomes as important as their own training. A black belt isn't just a fighter, they're a leader on the mats. And while everyone's style is different, the common thread is a sense of responsibility to pass on knowledge, to represent the art well, and to embody the values of discipline and respect that jiu-jitsu is built on. Culturally, the black belt also carries a kind of reverence. For most people, seeing someone with a black belt is a symbol of mastery, of decades of dedication. It comes with respect, but also expectations. The belt doesn't make you unbeatable, far from it, but it does mean that you've put in the time to understand jiu-jitsu on a level few ever reach. Many black belts will tell you that this stage is humbling in its own way, because you realize how endless the art really is. Even with a black belt tied around your waist, there's still so much more to learn. That's the real meaning of black belt. It isn't the peak of the mountain, it's the opening of a new path. A black belt is a recognition of everything you've achieved, but also a challenge to keep going, to keep improving, and to keep giving back. It's a milestone, not an end. And for the rare practitioners who keep climbing beyond black belt, there are higher ranks that symbolize not just personal mastery, but a lifetime of service to jiu-jitsu. That's where the coral and red belts come in, stages reserved for those who dedicate decades to shaping the art for future generations. Red/coral belt. Beyond black belt, there are only a handful of levels that very few practitioners will ever reach. After decades of dedication, a black belt begins earning degrees, and eventually those degrees turn into the coral belt, a red and black or red and white belt that represents not just mastery of technique, but an entire lifetime spent in service to jiu-jitsu. The coral belt isn't about competition anymore. By this point, most holders are long past the days of stepping into tournaments. Instead, their focus is on teaching, mentoring, and preserving the art. Coral belts are the professors, the pioneers, and the storytellers. People who have dedicated 30, 40, even 50 years of their life to spreading jiu-jitsu across the world. They're the ones who created a academies, built lineages, and mentored generations of champions. Their legacy isn't measured by medals, but by the impact they've had on students and the art itself. And above even that lies the red belt, the highest possible rank in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, reserved only for those who have devoted their entire life to the art. It's a belt of pure respect and recognition. Very few in history have ever worn it. The red belt doesn't symbolize being the most dangerous fighter in the room anymore. Instead, it represents being a guardian of Jiu-Jitsu, a custodian of its history, values, and traditions. At this stage, the journey has come full circle from the humble white belt learning to survive to the coral and red belts who have shaped the very culture of the sport. The red belt is not just a personal achievement. It's a living reminder that Jiu-Jitsu is bigger than any single competitor. It's an art that continues to grow because of those who carried it forward for a lifetime. Now that we've been through every belt, let me know what belt you're at down in the comments. Every Jiu-Jitsu school explained. Gracie Barra. Gracie Barra is one of the most recognized and influential names in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, with roots that trace back directly to the legendary Gracie family in Rio de Janeiro. Founded in 1986 by Carlos Gracie Jr., the first academy opened in the Barra da Tijuca neighborhood. What started as a single school has since grown into a worldwide network of over 900 academies, spread across 6 continents, making it one of the largest martial arts organizations on the planet. From the beginning, Carlos had a vision that went beyond producing champions. He wanted to make jiu-jitsu accessible to anyone willing to step on the mats. That meant creating a structured schedule, standardizing the training experience, and ensuring that whether you walked into a Gracie Barra in Brazil, the United States, Europe, or Asia, you'd be learning the same techniques, following the same progression, and training under the same core values. This approach has allowed students to move between locations with ease and has built a strong sense of belonging among members worldwide. The competitive success of Gracie Barra is undeniable. The team has produced countless world champions, from early icons like Marcio Feitosa, Roberto Correa, and Romulo Barral, to modern stars such as Felipe Pena and Lucas Barbosa. These athletes haven't just stood on top of podiums. They've helped push the technical evolution of jiu-jitsu, introducing new guard variations, passing strategies, and submission chains that are now staples of the sport. But competition is only one part of what makes Gracie Barra stand out. The organization places a heavy emphasis on discipline, respect, and the idea that jiu-jitsu is a vehicle for personal growth. Many academies run kids' programs designed to build confidence and focus from a young age, as well as classes for older practitioners who train more for health and lifestyle than for medals. Their motto, Jiu-Jitsu for Everyone, reflects this balance between elite sport and everyday self-improvement. The branding and team culture are just as strong as the technique. The signature red rash guards and the sense of unity at tournaments have made Gracie Barra instantly recognizable. Whether competing at the IBJJF Worlds or attending a local seminar, GB students know they're part of something much bigger than just their local gym. Today, Gracie Barra continues to expand through instructor certification programs, international events, and community outreach, ensuring that its influence grows with each passing year. For many, joining Gracie Barra isn't just about learning martial arts, it's about joining a global family. And while Gracie Barra thrives through size, consistency, and unity, there's another powerhouse in the jiu-jitsu world that has built its reputation with a different strategy, maintaining a smaller elite network and focusing heavily on innovation and aggressive competition at the highest levels. Checkmat. Checkmat is one of the most respected and competitive teams in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, known for its aggressive style, relentless pace, and world-class athletes. Founded in 2008 by Leonardo Vieira, a 2-time IBJJF world champion and one of the most dynamic grapplers of his era, Checkmat quickly made its presence felt on the international stage. While it doesn't have hundreds of affiliates like some organizations, its network is highly selective, focusing on quality over quantity. This has helped Checkmat maintain a tight-knit, elite-level culture where technical innovation and hard training are at the core. The name Checkmat is a nod to the strategy and precision of chess, and that's exactly how the team approaches competition. Their fighters are known for blending creative technique with intelligent tactics, often staying a step ahead of opponents in scrambles, transitions, and positional battles. The coaching philosophy emphasizes adaptability, preparing athletes to deal with any style they encounter, whether it's heavy pressure passing, complex guard games, or wrestling attacks. One of the biggest drivers of Checkmat's success has been its stable of elite competitors. The Vieira brothers, Leonardo and Ricardo, set the tone for the team's work ethic and technical depth. Over the years, Checkmat has produced champions like Michelle Nicolini, one of the greatest female grapplers of all time. These names not only dominate on the mats, but also serve as role models for the next generation of Checkmat athletes. The team has also been a breeding ground for innovation. Many Checkmat competitors are known for their explosive passing styles, creative backtakes, and high-percentage submissions. They are also well-rounded and have been highly successful in both IBJJF and ADCC formats. This versatility has made Checkmat one of the few teams consistently producing champions across different rule sets and styles of competition. Checkmat's influence extends far beyond Brazil. Its affiliates are spread across the United States, Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, and many are led by former champions who bring the team's high-level methodology to students around the world. Despite being smaller in size compared to giants like Gracie Barra, Checkmat's impact on the competitive scene is undeniable, regularly placing athletes on podiums at the most prestigious tournaments in the sport. The team is known for having a strong internal bond, with athletes from different countries coming together to train and sharpen each other's skills. This unity, combined with the team's competitive mindset, creates an environment where top athletes can thrive while beginners still feel welcomed and supported. While Gracie Barra's strength lies in its scale and accessibility, Checkmat has built its identity around elite-level competition, innovation, and strategic mastery. And as the team continues to develop new talent, it remains a major force in shaping the modern game of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. From the aggressive, chess-like tactics of Checkmat, we move to another legendary name in the sport, a team that has been producing champions for decades and is widely considered one of the most dominant competitive forces in BJJ history, Alliance Jiu-Jitsu. Alliance Jiu-Jitsu is widely regarded as one of the most dominant and successful teams in the history of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu competition. Founded in 1993 by Romero Cavalcanti, along with legendary students like Fabio Gurgel, Alexandra Paiva, and Fernando Guimarães, Alliance has built a reputation for technical precision, methodical training, and consistent success on the biggest stages of the sport. The team's headquarters, based in São Paulo, Brazil, is known for producing world champions year after year, creating a legacy that few, if any, teams can match. Alliance's approach to training is disciplined and highly structured. Their methodology focuses on refining the fundamentals to an elite level, while also preparing athletes for the specific demands of high-level competition. Drilling, positional sparring, and game planning are staples of the program, and the team's leadership has always emphasized the importance of strategy alongside technical skill. The result is a style that is both efficient and adaptable, allowing Alliance athletes to excel against a wide range of opponents. The list of champions produced by Alliance reads like a who's who of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu royalty. Fabio Gurgel, one of the founders, was himself a multiple-time world champion and remains a respected coach to this day. Marcelo Garcia, often called the greatest pound-for-pound grappler in history, made his name under the Alliance banner. These competitors have not only racked up world titles, but have also influenced the technical evolution of the sport through their innovations and teaching. One of the most impressive aspects of Alliance's legacy is its dominance in team competitions. Alliance has won the IBJJF World Team title more times than any other team, setting a record for consecutive victories that cemented its place as the gold standard in the sport. This wasn't by chance, it was the result of a system that consistently identifies talent, develops it, and keeps it competitive at the highest level. Alliance's influence extends far beyond Brazil, with a network of affiliates across the Americas, Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, each carrying the same structured methodology that has become Alliance's trademark. Athletes from around the globe come together at Alliance headquarters for training camps, creating an environment where iron sharpens iron and no detail is overlooked in preparation for competition. Even students who have no intention of competing benefit from the same technical accuracy, making Alliance academies highly respected in their local communities. From its dominance at the World Championships to the countless black belts it has produced, Alliance has set the standard for competitive excellence in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's a team where champions are made, records are broken, and history is written year after year. And while Alliance has built a legacy as one of the greatest teams in BJJ history, not every major player in the sport is a traditional team. Some organizations operate more as governing bodies, setting the rules, hosting the biggest tournaments, and shaping the sport on a global scale. IBJJF, the International Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Federation, or IBJJF, isn't a team. It's the main organization that runs the biggest tournaments in the sport. It was created in 2002 by Carlos Gracie Jr., and since then it's become the standard for competitive jiu-jitsu all over the world. If you want to compete at the highest level, this organization is where you go. They run famous events like the World Championship, the PANS, the European Championship, and the Brazilian Nationals. The IBJJF is also responsible for creating the rules, weight classes, and point system that most of the jiu-jitsu world uses today. Before they stepped in, different tournaments had completely different rules, which made it hard to know what to expect. The organization made things consistent, so no matter where you compete, you know the scoring and what techniques are allowed. Not everyone loves their system. Some people say the rules lead to more cautious, points-based matches instead of exciting submission finishes. Others think they should allow more techniques, and for many competitors, the cost of membership and tournament entry can be a big obstacle. Even with those criticisms, the organization is still the most respected stage for traditional jiu-jitsu competition. Winning an IBJJF World Championship is one of the highest goals in the sport. Some of the biggest legends like Roger Gracie, Marcelo Garcia, Gabi Garcia, and the Mendes brothers all made their names in IBJJF events. They also helped spread jiu-jitsu to every corner of the world. Today, they run tournaments on almost every continent, bringing together competitors from Brazil, the US, Europe, Asia, and beyond. For serious athletes, competing at IBJJF is a huge part of their career. They set the standard for what sport jiu-jitsu looks like today. And while they focus on structure and tradition, the next team on our list is all about innovation and aggressive modern styles of training and competition. Atos Jiu-Jitsu. Atos Jiu-Jitsu is one of the most dominant and well-known competition teams in the modern era of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It was founded in 2008 by two legends of the sport, André Galvão and Ramon Lemos, in São Paulo, Brazil. From the very start, Atos set itself apart with a style built around speed, precision, and relentless offense. They quickly became known for producing athletes who aren't just good at playing the rules, they finish fights. One of the biggest contributions Atos made to the sport is the development and popularization of the modern guard game. Many of the techniques and strategies you see in high-level jiu-jitsu today, like barimbalos, lapel guards, and creative sweeps, were either created or refined by Atos athletes. This innovation didn't just help their team win, it changed how the whole sport is played. Their headquarters eventually moved to San Diego, California, which became a hub for top-level training. The gym is known for having one of the toughest competition rooms in the world, with black belts and rising stars pushing each other every day. The list of champions they've produced is incredible. Names like the Mendes brothers, Lucas Barbosa, Kainan Duarte, and of course André Galvão himself, multiple-time ADCC and IBJJF world champion. Atos is also a global brand now, with affiliate schools around the world following their training methodology. They offer programs for beginners, hobbyists, and serious competitors, but the competition culture is at the heart of what they do. For many up-and-coming fighters, training at Atos HQ is seen as a rite of passage, a chance to test yourself against some of the best in the sport every single day. And that mix of innovation, intensity, and proven results has kept Atos at the top of the competition scene for more than a decade. Still, as dominant as they are, Atos athletes often step outside of traditional jiu-jitsu tournaments to chase the biggest stage in grappling, one that focuses purely on no GI competition, high stakes, and the most prestigious submission grappling title in the world. ADCC. The ADCC, or Abu Dhabi Combat Club, is the most prestigious no-gi grappling tournament in the world. It was created in 1998 by Sheikh Tanoun bin Zayed of the United Arab Emirates, who was a passionate jiu-jitsu student himself. His idea was simple: bring together the best grapplers from every discipline, not just Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and find out who is truly the best on the mat under a unique set of rules. From its very first event, ADCC stood out. It's not a yearly championship like most tournaments. It happens only once every 2 years, which makes winning it even more special. Competitors have to either win a qualifying event known as a trial or receive an invitation based on their achievements. This means the brackets are always stacked with the most elite talent in the world. World champions, MMA fighters, wrestlers, sambo specialists, and submission grapplers all in one place. The rule set is designed to encourage both positional dominance and submission hunting. Matches are longer than usual, with the first half often having no points to push athletes into taking risks and going for submissions. Once points start, the pace and intensity shoot up, and every position matters. This format has produced some of the most exciting, dramatic matches in grappling history. Winning ADCC is considered the highest achievement in no GI grappling. The list of past champions reads like a hall of fame for the sport. Legends like Marcelo Garcia, André Galvão, Gordon Ryan, and Kron Gracie have all taken gold here. Some champions have even cemented their legacy by winning multiple divisions or coming back to win over multiple decades. ADCC events are also famous for their atmosphere. The production feels big, huge arenas, big crowds, and a sense that every match matters. For many athletes, ADCC is the tournament they spend their entire careers preparing for, because one win here can change your status in the sport forever. In recent years, the ADCC brand has exploded worldwide. The trials are bigger than ever, with hundreds of athletes signing up for a shot at the main event. Social media coverage, highlight reels, and superfight cards have brought a whole new audience into submission grappling. And while ADCC is the pinnacle of no GI competition, most of the other organizations we've talked about, from Gracie Barra to Atos, have their eyes on a different stage when it comes to Jiu-Jitsu competition. That stage is run by the IBJJF, the most recognized governing body for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the world. Now that we have gone through some of the biggest Jiu-Jitsu schools and organizations, let me know down in the comments what gym you train for and also what tournaments you sign up for. Every BJJ era explained. The early era. The story of Jiu Jitsu begins long before it became a global sport, back when it was still just a handful of techniques being shared, tested, and adapted. In the early 1900s, a Japanese judoka named Mitsuyo Maeda, also known as Count Koma, traveled the world as both a teacher and a fighter. Maeda was part of a wave of martial artists spreading judo internationally, and his journey took him across Europe, North America, and eventually to Brazil. Along the way, he fought wrestlers, boxers, and even strongmen in challenge matches, showing that throws and submissions could neutralize almost any style. When Maeda finally settled in Brazil in the 1910s, he began teaching, and one of his students was Carlos Gracie. Carlos absorbed Maeda's teachings and introduced them to his brothers. Among them was Helio Gracie, who would end up reshaping the art more than anyone else. Helio was small, frail, and sickly as a child. He couldn't rely on strength or athleticism the way his brothers did, so he began to modify the techniques. Instead of explosive throws, he emphasized leverage, and instead of trying to muscle through holds, he learned how to survive, wait, and use timing to turn the tide. Out of necessity, Helio laid the foundation for what became known as Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. At this stage, Jiu-Jitsu wasn't a sport. It was about proving whether the system worked in real fights. The Gracie family became notorious for their challenge matches, where they would invite fighters from any style, boxing, karate, capoeira, and wrestlers to step onto the mat or into a ring with them. They were often brutal fights with very few rules, known as veil tudo, literally meaning anything goes. Helio himself fought men who outweighed him by 50, even 80 pounds. In many of these matches, he was battered but survived, showing that his system of leverage and submissions could keep a smaller fighter safe against giants. These early fights built the mythology of jiu-jitsu. Newspapers covered the Gracies as a family of fighters who could neutralize anyone. For spectators, it wasn't just entertainment, it was a revelation that technique and strategy could overcome brute strength. That philosophy became the soul of the art. The idea that a smaller, weaker person can defeat a bigger, stronger opponent through technique was proven again and again in those gritty challenge matches. The techniques of the early era reflected that philosophy. The closed guard, for example, became a symbol of survival and a way to tie up a stronger opponent, neutralize strikes, and slowly work toward a submission. Basic escapes, arm locks, chokes, and sweeps were drilled relentlessly, not with the goal of scoring points, but of ending a fight or surviving long enough to find an opening. Everything was rooted in practicality. You weren't training to win medals, you were training so that if someone jumped you in an alley or challenged you in a ring, you could walk away in one piece. But as effective as it was, jiu-jitsu in this era was still very limited in scope. It was a family-run practice passed from teacher to student in small circles. Outside of Brazil, almost nobody even knew it existed, and inside Brazil, it was respected but niche. This was not yet the global sport we know today. There were no massive tournaments, no streaming matches, no belt promotions happening worldwide. It was a fighting art in its rawest form. What's remarkable about the early era is how much of its DNA still exists in modern jiu-jitsu. They remain the core of the art, even as new rule sets and styles have taken jiu-jitsu in completely different directions. The early era was all about proving the art's legitimacy. It gave jiu-jitsu its identity and its credibility. But as the decades rolled on, the art entered a period where growth stalled, divisions formed, and jiu-jitsu risked fading into obscurity. The transition era. If the early era of jiu-jitsu was about proving its effectiveness, the next chapter, often called the transition era, was about growth, struggle, and laying the groundwork for the sport we know today. From the 1960s through the 1980s, jiu-jitsu remained almost entirely confined to Brazil. It wasn't yet the global powerhouse it would become, but inside those academies in Rio, the art was evolving at a rapid pace. This was the period when jiu-jitsu began to move away from being just a family art and started to become a true sport. Academies began running their own tournaments, experimenting with point systems, and testing what worked in competition. There was no universal rulebook yet, and both points and rules varied depending on the event. This was also the era when rivalries between academies started. The Gracie family itself had split into different schools, each with their own philosophies. Helio Gracie and his followers emphasized the old-school mindset of patience, survival, and efficiency. Carlson Gracie, on the other hand, broke away and built a team around aggression, pressure, and offense. His fighters weren't just trying to win, they were trying to dominate. That shift in style gave rise to champions like Murilo Bustamante, Ricardo de la Riva, and Walid Ismail, all competitors who would later shape entire generations of grapplers. The culture was fierce. Gym wars were common, with academies sending fighters to challenge one another and prove which style was superior. Training was intense, loyalty to your team was absolute, and stepping into another academy's territory often meant conflict. For outsiders, it might have looked chaotic, but for practitioners, it was the crucible that forged the next wave of champions. At the same time, this was an era when jiu-jitsu was still underground. Unlike judo, which had Olympic status, or karate, which spread worldwide, jiu-jitsu had almost no international presence. There were no magazines, no instructionals, no global tournaments. Knowledge was passed directly from instructor to student, often in small, sweaty academies with bare mats and little fanfare. Outside of Brazil, hardly anyone even knew what Jiu Jitsu was. But beneath that obscurity, the art was quietly expanding. This was when many of the modern guard positions first appeared. Ricardo de la Riva's famous guard was born during this period, changing how smaller athletes could control and attack bigger opponents with the de la Riva guard. Sweeps, pressure passing, and guard retention became more sophisticated as competitors experimented and refined their games in local tournaments. Even though the spotlight wasn't there yet, the technical base for modern competition was being built. The transition era wasn't glamorous. Prize money was almost non-existent, opportunities were limited, and most athletes had to work side jobs to support their training. But the practitioners of this time carried the art forward when it could easily have stagnated. They sharpened it, expanded it, and turned it from a family legacy into a broader martial art. Looking back, the transition era feels like the bridge that carried jiu-jitsu from the world of Vale Tudo and challenge matches into the world of structured tournaments and organized competition. Without this period of internal rivalries, underground tournaments, and technical innovation, jiu-jitsu wouldn't have been ready for the explosion that came next. Because in the 1990s, Carlos Gracie Jr. would create the IBJJF, and with it, jiu-jitsu would finally step onto the global stage. The IBJJF era. By the time the 1990s rolled around, jiu-jitsu was ready to leave its underground roots behind. For decades, the art had survived on challenge matches, regional tournaments, and fierce academy rivalries. But if it was going to become a legitimate global sport, it needed something else: structure. That structure came through the Carlos Gracie Jr., who in 2002 formally established the International Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Federation, better known as the IBJJF. In truth, the groundwork for this era had already been laid in the late 1990s. The IBJJF World Championships, commonly called Worlds, were first held in 1996, even before the federation was officially in place. From the very beginning, Worlds set itself apart as the ultimate proving ground for Gi competition. Winning gold there wasn't just about a medal, it meant you had achieved legitimacy in the sport. Legends like Roger Gracie, Marcelo Garcia, Marcus Almeida, and the Mendez brothers cemented their legacies on those mats. A single win at Worlds could change a competitor's career, and multiple wins made you immortal in the eyes of the jiu-jitsu community. But Worlds was only part of what made the IBJJF era so important. The federation created a global calendar of major events like the Pan Ams in North America, the Europeans for the rapidly growing European scene, and the Brasileiros in Brazil itself. Together, these tournaments formed a year-round circuit that gave jiu-jitsu its first real professional season. Athletes no longer had to rely on one-off matches or local tournaments to prove themselves. They now had a ladder to climb and a stage that brought together the best grapplers from around the world. The organization also brought standards. Before its creation, rules varied from place to place, making it hard to measure skill across regions. The federation solved this by unifying the point system with takedowns, sweeps, guard passes, mount, and back control, which all carried specific values. Whether you were competing in Sao Paulo, Lisbon, or Los Angeles, the rules were the same. This consistency gave jiu-jitsu an international identity. Gyms everywhere began training athletes not just to fight, but to fight under the organization's rules, and the federation's rulebook became the default framework for how the art was taught. Of course, the IBJJF era wasn't just about organization, it was also about innovation. The guard game exploded during this time. Athletes developed advanced positions like the berimbolo, worm guard, and lapel guards that were perfectly suited to the federation's point system. Competitors like the Mendes brothers and Leandro Lo pushed the boundaries of what was possible, turning what was once seen as stalling into highly technical, tactical battles. The GI became a laboratory for creativity, and the results influenced how the sport evolved worldwide. But with that prestige came plenty of criticism. Many athletes and fans accused the federation of prioritizing profit over competitors. Registration fees were notoriously high, sometimes hundreds of dollars per athlete, and black belts were required to pay annual membership fees just to compete. Entire teams spent thousands to attend major tournaments, only to find that prize money was minimal or non-existent compared to the costs. For years, grapplers at the highest level were essentially competing for glory, not financial reward, even as the federation profited. The rules themselves also drew fire. While the point system was designed to reward positional dominance, critics argued that it often encouraged stalling. Matches at the highest level sometimes devolved into battles for grips, advantages, or minor point leads rather than submission attempts. To casual fans, watching world champions win 2-0 or by a single advantage felt boring. Some even claimed that the IBJJF had created a style of jiu-jitsu that was safe and strategic, but not always exciting. And then there was the issue of adaptation. For years, the federation banned heel hooks and other leg entanglements that were exploding in popularity in no GI competitions. While organizations like ADCC embraced the leg lock revolution, the IBJJF resisted change, frustrating athletes who felt the federation was holding back the evolution of the sport. Politics and accusations of favoritism only added to the criticism, leaving many athletes with a love-hate relationship with the federation. Yet despite all the backlash, the IBJJF era cemented itself as one of the most important in jiu-jitsu history. Its tournaments became the benchmark of legitimacy, its rulebook became the global standard, and its champions from Roger Gracie to Marcelo Garcia and Buchecha became household names in the grappling world. But as the 2000s rolled further, another shift began to take place. Grapplers started stepping away from the gi and into a different arena, and that shift would mark the beginning of the next era in jiu-jitsu's evolution, the no-gi era. While the IBJJF was building structure and prestige around the traditional uniform, another wave was starting to take shape. This was the rise of submission grappling without the kimono, a shift that would transform jiu-jitsu into something bigger than it had ever been. From the late 1990s through the 2010s, what had once been a side project grew into a discipline of its own, with its own legends, rules, and culture. The roots of this era trace back to the Abu Dhabi Combat Club World Championship, better known as ADCC. Created in 1998 by Sheikh Tahnoon bin Zayed Al Nahyan, ADCC was never meant to be just another jiu-jitsu tournament. It was built to be the Olympics of grappling, a place where wrestlers, judokas, sambo specialists, catch wrestlers, and Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belts could all compete under one unified rule set. The format was unique. Matches began with a scoreless period to encourage submission hunting, then shifted into a point phase where positional control mattered. Submissions of all kinds, including heel hooks and reaping, were legal. This openness created an environment completely different from the IBJJF. From the very beginning, ADCC felt like something new. It crowned champions who became legends: Ricardo Arona, Marcelo Garcia, Roger Gracie, Andre Galvão. Garcia, in particular, embodied the spirit of ADCC, submitting much larger opponents and proving that grappling without the gi could be just as technical, dynamic, and beautiful. Held every 2 years, ADCC quickly became the biggest stage in the world, and winning gold there was seen as the ultimate accomplishment. But this era was never just about ADCC. It was also about the identity of jiu-jitsu itself beginning to change. In the early 2000s, Eddie Bravo introduced his 10th Planet system, removing the gi entirely and building positions that worked for MMA and pure submission grappling. His rubber guard, lockdown, and twister proved that this style had its own innovations, not just stripped-down versions of traditional techniques. Around the same time, shows like Grapplers Quest and Polaris gave athletes more professional opportunities. Submission-only formats began to gain traction, shifting the focus away from points and toward finishes. Fans loved it because it felt less like a tactical chess match and more like a fight. By the mid-2000s, training without the kimono was no longer just preparation for MMA. It had become a sport in its own right. A generation of athletes began to specialize in it. Gary Tonin became famous for his scrambles and relentless submission attempts. Marcelo Garcia's students carried his aggressive, fan-friendly style into this new environment. Wrestlers like Ben Askren and Jake Shields crossed over, proving that this faster, slipperier form of grappling welcomed athletes from all backgrounds. For fans, the era was refreshing. Without heavy grips and friction, the pace was faster, scrambles were harder to control, and submissions came out of nowhere. Heel hooks and leg entanglements became regular weapons, something the IBJJF still resisted at the time. The style also looked closer to MMA grappling, which made it easier for UFC fans to appreciate. Fighters like Georges St-Pierre, BJ Penn, and Demian Maia all credited their success to jiu-jitsu, and this style of competition made the connection between the sports stronger than ever. Of course, debates came with it. Traditionalists argued that by moving away from the kimono, grapplers were skipping important fundamentals, and that the new style was too chaotic, less technical, and overly reliant on athleticism. Supporters argued the opposite, saying it was more realistic, more exciting, and far more open to innovation. The debate still exists today, but by the end of the 2010s, there was no denying that submission grappling had established itself as a discipline of its own. The Abu Dhabi Combat Club World Championship was bigger than ever. Submission-only shows had built loyal audiences, and a new generation of athletes trained almost exclusively without the gi. But just as the grappling world was settling into this new identity, another revolution was about to change everything: the systematic rise of leg locks. What began as a niche strategy would soon define an entire era. The leg lock era. By the mid-2010s, submission grappling had already carved out its place as a sport of its own. Submission grappling organizations was thriving, submission-only shows were gaining fans, and a new generation of athletes was specializing in the rash guard style of competition. But then came a technical revolution that would completely reshape the game: the rise of systematic leg locks. Leg attacks had always existed in jiu-jitsu. Heel hooks, knee bars, and toe holds were known, but for decades they were treated as dirty tricks or shortcuts rather than serious strategies. Many traditional academies even banned them altogether, insisting that leg locks were dangerous and lacked the sophistication of passing, mounting, or taking the back. For a long time, the message was clear: if you relied on leg locks, you were playing a cheap game. That perception changed almost overnight. John Danaher, a coach based in New York City, began building a group of athletes who approached leg locks differently. Instead of treating them as one-off moves, he created entire systems around them, with entries, control positions, transitions, and finishes that left opponents with no escape. His students, later known as the Danaher Death Squad, began tearing through competition. Gary Tonin made waves in submission submission-only formats. But it was Gordon Ryan who truly carried the system onto the biggest stage, dominating high-level tournaments and proving that leg locks weren't just effective, they were unstoppable when applied with precision. Matches were no longer decided just by guard passes or sweeps. Suddenly, athletes had to fear their legs being attacked at every moment. The revolution spread fast. Gyms that had once ignored leg locks were now scrambling to study them. Competitors who dismissed them were getting tapped in front of packed crowds. The entire meta of grappling shifted in just a few short years. For fans, the leg lock era was electrifying. Submissions were happening faster. Matches felt more dangerous. Athletes who had once been considered average suddenly had a weapon that could take out world champions. Watching an underdog catch a heel hook on a superstar gave this era a level of unpredictability that had been missing. Every scramble had consequences, and every mistake could mean instant defeat. Of course, the leg lock era also brought its critics. Traditionalists argued that the focus on legs made grappling one-dimensional, with athletes sitting to guard and diving for ankles instead of building complete games. Others felt it was unsafe, pointing to the devastating injuries heel hooks can cause if applied or resisted carelessly. But no matter the criticism, the results spoke for themselves. The athletes who embraced the system won, and the ones who resisted fell behind. The leg lock era didn't just add a new submission to the arsenal. It changed the way the entire sport thought about control, risk, and strategy. It forced evolution at every level, from white belts in local gyms to champions on the world's biggest stages. The modern era. The 2000s and 20s marked what many call the modern era of Jiu Jitsu, a period where the sport has gone from underground to global, from niche tournaments to professional events with millions of viewers, and from a community-based art to a stage with personalities, controversies, and money at the center. The clearest example of this transformation came with ADCC 2022. Held in Las Vegas, it wasn't just another grappling tournament, it was a spectacle. Thousands of fans packed the Thomas and Mack Center with professional production, live commentary, walkouts, and worldwide streaming. For the first time, grappling felt like it was being presented on the same level as MMA or boxing. The matches themselves delivered history. Gordon Ryan cemented himself as the most dominant submission grappler of all time, tearing through his division and then defeating Andre Galvao in the super fight in front of a roaring crowd. Rising stars like Cade Rotolo showed that a new generation was ready to carry the torch, bringing energy and creativity to the mats. But ADCC isn't the only name in town anymore. In 2024, Craig Jones shocked the community by launching the Craig Jones Invitational. Frustrated with low payouts and poor treatment of athletes, Craig put together an event that guaranteed million-dollar prizes for winners and paydays for every competitor. His viral promotion, where he dumped a duffel bag full of cash on Joe Rogan's table, set the tone. Craig's Invitational wasn't just a tournament, it was a movement. The tournament had fights like the B-Team versus New Wave and Helena Cravar versus Sarah Galvao. Craig also donated hundreds of thousands to charity, proving that grappling could entertain and give back at the same time. Fans loved the chaos, the humor, and the authenticity. Critics called it gimmicky or unsustainable, but no one could ignore it. For the first time, grapplers were being treated like professionals with life-changing money on the line. Meanwhile, the UFC entered the grappling game with UFC BJJ, launching its own league in 2025. Instead of copying existing tournaments, the UFC built something new. Matches were held in a small, bowl-shaped cage, scored with the same 10-point must system used in MMA. Champions like Mikey Musumeci, Andrew Tackett, and Mason Fowler were crowned in front of massive online audiences, with millions watching free streams on YouTube. By refusing to allow athletes with admitted steroid use, like Gordon Ryan, the UFC made a bold statement about legitimacy. For many fans, this was their first real taste of high-level grappling outside of the UFC cage, and it gave the sport a mainstream push that had been missing for decades. Alongside these big organizations, streaming platforms and social media have transformed how fans consume grappling. A match that once would have been seen by a few hundred people in a gym is now clipped, shared, and debated by millions online within hours. Personalities like Mikey Musumeci, Craig Jones, and Gordon Ryan have become stars not just for what they do on the mats, but for their presence off them. Mikey is loved for his humility, quirkiness, and authenticity. Craig has built a fan base with his dry humor, honesty, and willingness to challenge the system. Gordon, meanwhile, continues to dominate while embracing the villain role, openly admitting to steroid use and stirring drama at every turn. Whether you love them or hate them, these personalities have given grappling storylines, rivalries, and hype that keep fans engaged beyond just the techniques. Of course, the modern era isn't without controversy. Steroid use remains one of the biggest debates in the sport. Gordon Ryan's admissions have divided fans, with some arguing that steroids are an open secret in grappling, and others insisting that clean athletes are being robbed of fair competition. At the same time, the technical side of the sport has never been deeper. The leg lock revolution is no longer just a revolution, it's the norm. Every serious grappler now trains entries, defenses, and counters. But it hasn't stopped there. Back takes, wrestling integration, and hybrid styles are evolving faster than ever. Athletes like the Ruotolo brothers are blending traditional jiu-jitsu with dynamic wrestling scrambles. Mikey Musumeci has shown how smaller athletes can still thrive at the highest level with precision and innovation. And teams like New Wave, B-Team, Atos, and Dream Art are constantly pushing each other to refine the game. What makes the modern era unique is that Jiu-Jitsu is finally being treated as both a martial art and an entertainment product. Fans expect high-level technique, but they also want storylines, rivalries, and big personalities to follow. Athletes are no longer just competitors, they are brands, with podcasts, instructional videos, and massive social media platforms. In many ways, Jiu-Jitsu today mirrors the early UFC, where a niche martial art exploded into something mainstream because it was equal parts sport and spectacle. The modern era is still being written. What we do know is that Jiu-Jitsu has never had more visibility, more controversy, or more momentum than it does today. From the crowded academies of Rio to sold-out arenas in Las Vegas, the journey has been incredible, and right now we're living through the most exciting, unpredictable era the sport has ever seen. If you came this far, let me know down in the comments by writing black belt, and don't forget to subscribe for more content. The most loved versus hated grapplers? Gordon Ryan. No grappler in history divides opinion quite like Gordon Ryan. On the mats, he's almost untouchable. He's a multiple-time ADCC champion, a multiple-time world champion, and to many, the greatest no-GI grappler of all time. His dominance is so absolute that matches often feel like a formality. Everyone expects him to win, and most of the time he does it with ease. Whether it's strangling his way through ADCC divisions without giving up a single point, or shutting down world-class black belts with surgical precision, Gordon makes elite competition look unfair. But what makes Gordon Ryan hated isn't just his ability, it's everything else that comes with it. Gordon has built his career as much on trash talk as on submissions. He's insulted opponents in interviews, mocked rivals like Felipe Pena and Andre Galvão, and even taken aim at entire gyms. No one is safe from his social media tirades, where he mixes arrogance with humor and never lets criticism slide. He positions himself not just as the best grappler alive, but as the undisputed king of jiu-jitsu, with no humility and no apologies. His rivalries only fuel the fire. The ongoing feud with Felipe Pena, where Gordon lost early but came back to dominate in later matches, is one of the most bitter storylines in modern grappling. His heated confrontation with Andre Galvão at ADCC 2022, when the two nearly came to blows backstage, cemented his role as the sport's villain. Gordon thrives on conflict, and in many ways he welcomes the hate as part of his brand. Then there's the issue of PEDs. Gordon has openly admitted to steroid use, at times even bragging about it, which only intensifies the resentment from fans who value clean competition. For purists, it feels like a stain on his accomplishments. For his fans, it's just another example of him being brutally honest in a sport where PED use is an open secret. The controversies don't stop there. Gordon's dominance inside the gym comes alongside constant drama outside of it, with public feuds, ugly arguments online, even temporary retirements citing stomach issues and burnout. Supporters argue he's the ultimate competitor, someone who elevates jiu-jitsu by backing up every word with dominance. Critics call him toxic, arrogant, and proof that being the most talented doesn't always earn you respect. But that's the paradox of Gordon Ryan. He's hated because of how he acts, but also because he wins so much that people can't stop watching. He's simultaneously the most admired and most despised grappler alive. But speaking of Gordon, the next person is the polar opposite in every way. Marcelo Garcia. If Gordon Ryan is the sport's villain, Marcelo Garcia is the exact opposite. Standing at just 5 feet 7 inches and competing against opponents who were often bigger, stronger, and longer, Marcelo built his legacy by proving that technique, heart, and relentless offense could overcome size. He's a 4-time ADCC champion and a 5-time IBJJF world champion, but titles only scratch the surface of his impact. Marcelo's style was built around constant movement and submission hunting. He popularized the butterfly guard, the X guard, and the guillotine choke in ways that transformed how the entire sport played. While others stalled for points, Marcelo attacked nonstop. His matches were exciting because he was never satisfied with a decision. He wanted to finish no matter who stood across from him. Watching Marcelo compete was watching someone redefine what was possible for smaller grapplers, and it inspired an entire generation to believe they could succeed regardless of body type. But what truly set Marcelo apart wasn't just his game, it was his attitude. He carried himself with humility in a sport often filled with big egos. He never trash-talked, never disrespected opponents, and never needed theatrics to sell a match. Instead, he won fans by smiling through adversity, congratulating his rivals, and making every competitor feel valued. Even his fiercest opponents respected him, which is rare in a sport that thrives on grudges. Marcelo's influence didn't end when he stepped away from competition. In New York, he built one of the most respected academies in the world, shaping future champions and continuing to spread the values that made him beloved. Students describe him as approachable, patient, and always eager to share knowledge. In an era where controversy often overshadows performance, Marcelo's reputation has remained untarnished. To fans, Marcelo Garcia is more than just a champion. He's the people's champion. He represents everything they want jiu-jitsu to stand for: humility, creativity, and the pursuit of submissions over politics. His legacy is proof that you don't need arrogance, drama, or scandal to leave your mark. And that's why when you put Marcelo side by side with someone like the next person, the contrast couldn't be clearer. Dylan Danis. Dylan Danis is one of the most polarizing names in jiu-jitsu, but not for the reasons you might hope. Early in his career, Dylan was a legitimate talent. He earned his black belt under Marcelo Garcia and had the potential to become one of the next great competitors in the sport. He found success in IBJJF competition, put on strong performances at events like Polaris, and even became known for his slick leg locks at a time when that game was still developing. But instead of building his reputation on the mats, Dylan built it on chaos outside of them. His career shifted from competition to controversy, and it's that shift that turned him into one of the most hated figures in the grappling world. Dylan's association with Conor McGregor during the height of McGregor's UFC fame put him in the spotlight, but instead of using that exposure to push jiu-jitsu, Dylan leaned into antics. Social media trolling, Twitter spats, staged callouts, and constant trash talk became his brand. He picked fights he rarely followed through on. He got into altercations outside of competition, and he built a reputation as someone more interested in clout than in grappling itself. Fans who once saw him as a promising competitor began to see him as wasted potential, someone with the skills to make history, but no interest in actually proving it. When he transitioned into MMA, it only amplified that reputation. His Bellator run was more hype than substance, and instead of climbing through tough opponents, Dylan fought once or twice before disappearing into social media drama again. By the time he started chasing a boxing match with Logan Paul, his name in the jiu-jitsu world had become almost a punchline. People talked less about what he'd achieved and more about what he'd failed to deliver. Dylan's story is frustrating because the talent was real, but the dedication wasn't. Craig Jones. Craig Jones is one of the rare figures in grappling who can stir controversy and still be embraced by fans. He exploded onto the scene at ADCC 2017 when he submitted Leandro Lo, one of the greatest competitors of all time, and nearly caught a few more legends in the same run. Almost overnight, the unknown Australian became a household name in jiu-jitsu. From there, he proved it wasn't a fluke. He kept showing up at the biggest events, putting top athletes in danger with his dangerous leg lock game and earning medals on the sport's biggest stage. But what really makes Craig stand out isn't just his skill, it's his personality. He's built his image as a mix of elite grappler and class clown, someone who can be world-class on the mats but also joke about himself, his losses, and the absurd side of jiu-jitsu. Fans love his dry Australian humor, his sarcastic interviews, and the way he never takes himself too seriously. In a sport filled with egos and trash talk, Craig comes across as self-aware and relatable, and that's a big part of why people support him. At the same time, Craig has never been afraid to speak his mind. When other athletes stayed quiet about issues like poor pay or tournament politics, Craig called them out. He became a loud critic of ADCC's prize money structure, questioning why the biggest event in the sport paid so little compared to how much attention it brought. Instead of just complaining, he put his own money on the line and created the Craig Jones Invitational, a high-paying alternative that promised million-dollar prizes for winners. For fans, this cemented him as someone willing to back up his words and fight for the athletes, not just for himself. His gym life added another layer to his story. After training with John Danaher and the original Danaher Death Squad, Craig split away with Nicky Rodriguez, Nicky Ryan, and Ethan Krellensten to form the B Team in Austin, Texas. The split was filled with drama, whispers of bad blood, team politics, and rivalries with Gordon Ryan's new wave. Fans loved the narrative. On one side, you had Gordon and Danaher, the hyper-structured, dominant machine of grappling. On the other side, you had Craig and the B Team, a looser, funnier, but still highly dangerous squad. It gave fans something fresh to follow, and Craig leaned into it with his usual mix of humor and honesty. Of course, not everyone loves Craig. Some purists see his jokes as disrespectful or feel he doesn't take competition seriously enough. He's often criticized for being the best guy to never win gold, since despite multiple podium finishes at ADCC, he hasn't won the title outright. But for many fans, that only adds to his charm. He's the underdog who comes close, the guy who entertains even when he loses, and the grappler who's always willing to put himself out there. Craig Jones is controversial. Yes, he criticizes organizations, he jokes about sensitive topics, and he doesn't hide behind a fake personality. But he's also loved because he brings something grappling desperately needs: personality, entertainment, and a willingness to challenge the system. He may never be remembered as the most dominant grappler of all time, but he will absolutely be remembered as one of the most important figures in keeping the sport alive, interesting, and fun. And where Craig built controversy into something lovable, the next person on the list showed how quickly admiration can crumble when scandal enters the picture. Mika Galvão. Mika Galvão was once seen as the brightest prodigy in all of jiu-jitsu. Coming from Manaus, Brazil, he grew up on the mats, trained by his father from the time he was a child, and by his teenage years he was already tearing through black belts. When he became the youngest IBJJF world champion in history at just 18 years old, it felt like the sport had found its future superstar. Fans compared him to Marcelo Garcia, humble, respectful, technical, and seemingly destined to dominate for the next decade. For a moment, Mika was the golden boy of grappling, but that image didn't last. In 2023, 2003, just months after winning Worlds, Micah tested positive for PEDS. The IBJJF stripped him of his title, and the community's perception of him changed overnight. Instead of being remembered as the youngest world champion ever, he became remembered as the youngest grappler to lose it all to a doping scandal. The revelation shocked fans not because PED use in jiu-jitsu was unheard of, but because Micah had been held up as a clean, wholesome role model, the exact opposite of someone cutting corners. For many fans, this was more than just a failed drug test. It felt like a betrayal. Micah was supposed to be the sport's next great ambassador, a young champion who could carry jiu-jitsu forward with integrity. Instead, his name became a symbol of distrust. Every win since then has carried an asterisk in the eyes of critics, who question whether his success is natural or chemically enhanced. Even those who still admire his talent admit that the shine has worn off, and rebuilding his reputation will be an uphill battle. That doesn't mean Micah isn't still an incredible competitor. His technique, pace, and athleticism remain world-class, and he's young enough to bounce back and write a new chapter. But the PED scandal will always follow him, and for many fans, no amount of medals can erase that stain. Micah Galvão went from being the sport's golden child to one of its most controversial figures, and he'll have to live with that every time he steps on the mat. And while Micah's reputation fell apart under scandal, the next person is one of the most loved innovators jiu-jitsu has ever seen. Eddie Bravo. Eddie Bravo isn't remembered as the most decorated competitor, but few people in jiu-jitsu history have had a bigger cultural impact. In 2003, he walked into ADCC as a massive underdog, facing Royler Gracie, one of the most respected competitors in the Gracie family. Almost nobody gave Eddie a chance, but then, in one of the most iconic moments in grappling history, he locked up a triangle choke and forced Royler to tap. That single moment sent shockwaves through the jiu-jitsu world. Eddie Bravo, an outsider from Los Angeles with no direct family ties to the Gracie dynasty, had just beaten one of their greatest champions on the biggest stage. That win could have been the peak of his story, but Eddie turned it into the beginning of something much larger. Instead of chasing medals and titles, he created his own gym called 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu. The philosophy was radical at the time. Eddie stripped away the gi entirely, focusing on no-gi submission grappling at a time when the gi still dominated the competitive scene. He's created unique positions like the rubber guard, the lockdown, and the truck, designed specifically to work against wrestlers and MMA fighters who weren't wearing kimonos. And of course, his infamous twister submission, once considered an exotic move which became part of the mainstream playbook after fighters like Chan Sung Jung pulled it off inside the UFC. But Eddie's influence went far beyond techniques. He built a culture. Walk into a 10th Planet gym and you immediately notice it's different. No gi training, no rigid hierarchy, no bowing in lines. Instead, you see colorful rash guards, graffiti-style logos, music blasting, and students encouraged to experiment and build their own games. Eddie wanted jiu-jitsu to be creative, not rigid. He gave permission to people who felt out of place in traditional gyms to find their own style and express themselves. That culture attracted artists, musicians, skaters, MMA fighters, and people who might never have fit into the traditional martial arts mold. For them, 10th Planet wasn't just a gym, it was a home. His influence spilled directly into MMA. Fighters like Tony Ferguson brought Eddie's rubber guard into the UFC, using it to control opponents from the bottom in ways that baffled traditional grapplers. Eddie's emphasis on no-gi also anticipated the sport's future. Long before leg locks and heel hooks became mainstream, Eddie was pushing students to adapt for MMA and real combat. In hindsight, his approach feels ahead of its time. Of course, Eddie Bravo is also a personality. He's outspoken and unafraid to say things that spark debate. His interviews, his commentary alongside Joe Rogan, and his wild energy made him one of the most recognizable voices in grappling. Even when people disagreed with his theories or his quirks, they couldn't deny his passion for the art. Fans love him because he feels authentic, someone who cares deeply about jiu-jitsu, wants to see it grow, and isn't afraid to break rules to get there. Eddie Bravo's legacy isn't measured in IBJJF titles or ADCC medals. It's measured in culture. He changed the way people think about no-gi. He created a global network of gyms that continues to expand, and he gave jiu-jitsu an identity outside of tradition, one that values creativity, individuality, and freedom. For many grapplers, Eddie isn't just a coach or an innovator. He's a reminder that jiu-jitsu doesn't have to look one way to be effective. It can evolve. It can change. It can be whatever you make of it. And while Eddie built his reputation on innovation and love for the art, the next person's story is far darker, with a career once respected, now clouded by controversy and criticism. Roberto Cyborg Abreu. Cyborg was once one of the most respected heavyweights in jiu-jitsu. He built a long and decorated career, winning EBJJF titles, claiming the ADCC Absolute Championship in 2013, and competing at the highest level well into his late 30s. He was admired not just for his victories, but for his longevity, his leadership, and the way he carried himself as a representative of the sport. For years, Cyborg was seen as a mentor figure, running his own team, shaping athletes, and showing that you could stay relevant in competition, even as new generations of grapplers came up behind you. you. But all of that has been overshadowed by controversy. In recent years, Cyborg became implicated in serious scandals, including accusations of covering up abuse within his team. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Sponsors pulled away, athletes distanced themselves, and the community that once held him in high regard began to view him with suspicion and anger. What had taken decades to build was torn down almost overnight. Today, when people talk about Cyborg, it's no longer about his ADCC run or his titles. It's about mistrust, disappointment, and the feeling that he betrayed the values Jiu-Jitsu is supposed to stand for. His story is a harsh reminder that no amount of medals or accomplishments can protect a legacy if the respect is lost outside the mats. And in sharp contrast to Cyborg's fall, the next Italian we're talking about has become one of the most beloved grapplers alive. Not because of controversy, but because of his authenticity. Mikey Musumeci is one of the purest fan favorites in all of grappling. At first glance, he doesn't look like your typical world champion. Skinny frame, nerdy personality, soft-spoken demeanor, but that's exactly why fans connect with him. He represents the idea that you don't have to be larger than life to dominate in jiu-jitsu. You just have to love the art and dedicate yourself to it completely. On the competitive side, Mikey's accomplishments are historic. He's a multiple-time IBJJF world champion, the first American to ever win multiple GI world titles at the black belt level, and he's carried that same success into no GA. In one championship, he's become the face of submission grappling, defending his flyweight title against some of the best in the world, and doing it with the same precision and calmness that made him famous. His technique is razor sharp, backtakes to his signature leg attacks. He's shown time and again that his jiu-jitsu can shut down athletes who are bigger, stronger, and more athletic. But what truly makes Mikey beloved isn't just the medals, it's his personality. He's humble, quirky, and unapologetically himself. He openly talks about his love of pizza and pasta, his obsessive study of technique, which have become almost part of his lore. In interviews, he comes across as genuine and kind, never trying to be someone he's not. Fans see him as relatable or like the nerd who became a world champion through sheer dedication. Mikey also embodies respect for the art. He never disrespects opponents, never stirs drama for attention, and never tries to play a villain. Instead, he wins people over through authenticity. In a sport where so many figures are loved or hated because of their controversies, Mikey stands out by being admired simply for who he is. His rise has also inspired countless younger grapplers. Kids who might not see themselves in the hulking ADCC champions can look at Mikey and realize that intelligence, creativity, and relentless work can take you just as far. For many, he represents the soul of jiu-jitsu, pure love for the craft, without ego, without politics, and without gimmicks. Mikey Musumeci may never be the loudest voice in the sport, but he doesn't need to be. His jiu-jitsu, his humility, and his authenticity make him one of the most loved grapplers of all time. Now that we've been through some of the most hated and loved jiu-jitsu athletes, let me know down in the comments who your favorite athlete is. And don't forget to subscribe and like the video.